What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. We are here to chat all about, begrudgingly, I have to say it, the MLS Cup champions, LA Galaxy, and how we probably will have to touch on how they cheated their way to beat Red Bull. Maybe, I don't know, whatever. I mean, yeah, they were pretty good on the day. I'll have to give it to them. But we are excited to be joined by Ananda from Cuna Galaxiana. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm well, man. It's been a crazy sporting weekend over the past, I would say, 24 to 48 hours here
Mhm.
in the city of Los Angeles. Even dating it back to, just even Friday or late last week. A lot of bombs dropping, man, whether it's stash bombs or Woj bombs, or I guess not Woj bombs these days, shams bombs, whatever you would call them now.
Yeah.
So it's been a pretty crazy couple of days, but no, doing well. And yeah, man, happy to connect with you on this and just kind of give a glimpse to your audience about what is going on with this year's LA Galaxy team because there's a lot going on, my friend.
That there are, and like I said, we met up on Goals TV doing the preview, and I was like, we need to chat with you guys again. And unfortunately, my co-host Connor couldn't be here, but you started pulling out stats, and Connor's my stat guy, so I was like, oh, this would be so good to get you guys together, and
Yeah.
we couldn't make it work, but we'll have to bring it on back because you guys would get on real well. But one thing that we all share in common is we got a couple of pretty cool scarves to show off, so I want to send it over to you for scarf of the week. What do you got?
Scarf of the week. So, by the way, guys, just so you know, I asked Andrew, did it have to be Galaxy or MLS specific? And I'm glad he said no because this one right here is a pretty special one to me. It means it hits a lot of all on a lot of personal levels, but I'll just show it to you right here. It's kind of hard to see my screen, but I'll kind of show it there. So this is it says Spain versus Germany, FIFA. I think it's All Bite or is it all? I can't even read it.
Yes.
All Bite Stadium. 27th of November in 2022. That was I was there. I was at the game actually in Qatar, and this is you got the little Spain and Germany there on both sides.
Nice.
I look, this was actually my second World Cup. World Cups are special, man. I don't know if you've ever uh, been to one, but they are just there's a buzz and an ambiance and a frenzy and a fever that I can't really explain. You just have to be there to recognize it, and especially whether you're a football fan or not, because or soccer fan, because I went with my wife, and this was her first World Cup, and she's from Spain, so that's why we were following the Spanish national team for the first. Unfortunately, it happened to be four games at the time. Just that was probably one of the worst days of my life when we lost to Morocco on PKs. I don't want to relive that, but it was the thing that I took away out of it that made me super happy, man, was just seeing my wife, who is not a soccer fan at all. She got caught up in the frenzy. She got caught up in the fever. We were dancing, we were shouting, we were screaming, we were just having a good time, just supporting our team. And I think that's what World Cups do to you. So in that vein, like super excited to see what the World Cup in this country will do to soccer. We saw the impacts of what '94 did, and we're going to see the impacts of what this upcoming World Cup, man. Because I'm telling you, it turns casuals into potential diehards, right?
Yeah.
So we're yeah. So it's nice to see.
Oh man, now I've got the excitement. Like I
Yeah.
cannot wait for it to get here. But it is. I echo all your statement. I have not been to one yet, but even just watching it, right, is at home on your TV. It's like I can't get pulled away from it. It was 2018, the one we didn't unfortunately qualify for, where I was working my first real like co-op internship, and it was like I had to miss all these games. I'm like, this is the worst month of my life. Like the only thing I want to do is sit down and watch this game, and I can't do it. I gotta like I'm going back checking scores. I'm like,
Yeah.
this is terrible. And then 2022 came around, and I was in grad school, so I was able to basically have my laptop out with me, watch the games as I'm doing work. I'm like, this is great. And now it's like, okay, 2026. I gotta figure out what I'm doing in 2026. I might be sick that like whole month. I might just need a
Oh,
need a
yeah, exactly,
you
exactly.
know.
Real quick, like it's really apropos because I actually used to live in the New York, New Jersey area,
Oh yeah.
and that's a little fun fact about me. I used to work out there, and in 2014, I was working out in New Jersey at the time, and my boss there, like he was a huge soccer fan, Colombian fan. He was half Colombian, so we would literally like plan our lunches right in the break room just watching soccer, man. It
Yeah.
it kind of took me back to that what you just said right there. So
Oh, so
yeah,
good.
yeah,
So good. Yeah. I I did actually, for the longest time, I never had one of these, but I finally pulled out an LA Galaxy
Ooh,
scarf. I picked it up. I think this was right before or right after the MLS Cup final. So it showed up like I watched the game. We lost. I was like, oh, this sucks. And then I get the alert on my phone, like, oh, you've got a package. And I open it up, it's like staring me in the face. I'm like,
yeah,
yeah, of course, the timing's perfect, right? But it fits well for the day. That's the one thing about being the MLS based podcast that we are is we only discriminate against the scarves of New York City and DC United. So everybody else is cool. But
fair enough.
we'll go from there. So, like I said, we talked about it a little bit. The Galaxy had a pretty good 2024, I think, right? MLS Cup, second in the West, right? Those were the highlights. You had a first round Leagues Cup exit. That wasn't super great, but they had one of the most exciting attacks in the league, no doubt about it, right? Greg Vanney's in charge again, and he has turned this team into something to be feared. But it does look like they're going to be missing, actually confirmed now after the post, they are going to be missing at least two keys in the attack, one permanently, one for quite a while. How he handles the 2025 Champions Cup and Leagues Cup will be super interesting as this club comes in as one with super high expectation. I don't think that's a controversial take there, but I wanted to kind of hear your thoughts from your 2024 experiences. Was it expected you guys were going to go all the way? Was that the expectation? Your thoughts?
Yeah, simple answer is no. Becoming into the season, there was a lot of unknowns, right? Even coming to the CVI, we were still working on our DP deals, for
Mhm.
example, right? We had Will Kuntz on recently on La Cuna Galaxiana, and he was saying that, last year, the roster was nowhere near complete. He was busy on the phone trying to get JP, Joseph Paintsill,
Mhm.
as the first DP, as sort of the first domino to drop. And then all the other signings kind of came from there, Gabriel Peck, et cetera. So I think coming into the season, we didn't know what to expect because to fill two big gaps in your roster, as big as a DP, especially in this league, it's a lot, right? And
Mhm.
it's a lot to ask for to gel in the first season. And everyone, Galaxy fans, pundits, everyone was saying that this was a rebuild year for the LA Galaxy. So to come into the season and look, I think that first game against Miami, even though we tied and we only got a point out of that result, I think that showed the fan base and the team quite a bit. Just going toe to toe with Miami, and I think things just kind of progressed from there. But that was a very very early indication of possibly the heights and the levels that this team could reach, right? And the fact that you're competing against Miami in game one at home, that's already a good sign. And luckily we took it all the way under the tutelage of Greg Vanney and his great coaching staff.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, from us, I think myself personally had them either play in game or out of the playoffs completely because I wasn't sold on your back line. I didn't like it. I thought we're gonna get picked apart. But I think we're with News Across the Galaxy and we're doing this, and I forget who the host was, but he told us like, yeah, the back line looks old and slow, but the best defense is a good attack. And we were like, okay, we'll have to see it. And there you are, right? And you dominate the ball. You don't have to worry about all these transition moments because you're in possession so well. You're sitting in deep. You're able to play in transition when you want to. You're able to control and move your pieces. Brilliant, brilliant play. And one of the things that I really like about what LA did is, yeah, they won MLS Cup. They reached the highest point that you can get to, and they did not slow down from there. And they made a ton and ton of moves and signings and re-signings. And I kind of wanted to pick your brain on what the best addition has been so far.
Wow. Well, we know last year's best edition. That was Will Kuntz. That's a slam dunk there.
Yeah, 100%.
Uh,
percent
yeah. So, well, it's funny because again, like I mentioned, we had Will on, and he told us in I forgot it was our show or media day. He wanted to run it back. That was his goal. He wanted to run this thing back, and I mean, I don't blame him, right? Especially with the type of talent, the type of experience, the combination of youth and experience that was on this team. Just in the locker room was a really really harmonized locker room. So I'll tell you this, the losses hurt quite a bit, right? But now switching gears to the best edition, look, I haven't seen this guy play. I had no very little of him. All I know is just scouting reports and FB ref charts and all that good stuff. But I think that the recent signing of this 21-year-old midfielder from Uruguay named Lucas Sanabria from Nacional, I think that's to me that's going to be the most exciting addition for all the additions that we are making. Look, this is a U22 player, right? And we know U22 players in this league are a way for teams to access that type of talent, but not have it hit against your salary cap. So I think this is a big deal for the LA Galaxy, and given the losses of Gaston Brugman and Mark Delgado, two bona fide, really starting level players in this league, we had to do something, and I think U22 is probably the best lever that we had to refill that position, right? We had some other midfield additions as well, one that you're pretty familiar with, I would imagine, with the experience of Sean Davis. But I think, look, this guy, he's going to be one to watch. And coming into the CVI, which starts this week, I can't believe preseason is here
Isn't
already
that
this
crazy?
week. It's nuts, man. It's so gnarly. We've had, I mean, both of our teams, right? We've had pretty short off seasons, but
Yeah.
to spend 5 million on a transfer fee on this guy, you've got to have some pretty big, large conviction that this is going to work out. And what we're hearing, Andrew, from, for example, the Uruguay press is naming him or scouting him as a volante mixto, which means he's a mixed midfielder. So he can play that box to box role, or he can play as a holding midfielder in a double pivot. As some of his key attributes and his strengths are just a great ability to recover balls. He's a really good connector, so he plays very simply, but he connects the defense and midfield really well, especially in those transition moments. And he's also, one of the things that Will Kuntz says all the time about recruitment is his character and his level of competitiveness. And he's got, from all the reports that we've seen, he's got a really, really high drive to win and just a high level of competitiveness. And I think, especially in the midfield of the LA Galaxy, and sort of, I guess, counteracting or finding ways to be good both offensively and defensively in the transition, I think those are qualities that we really, really need in this midfield, especially with the losses of guys like Mark Delgado and Gaston Brugman.
Yeah, we actually I didn't think it was confirmed. Like MLS didn't post anything about it, because that's kind of how we keep
Yeah,
track of our
it's
transfers
to
here.
be fair with you. Actually, you bring up a good point. So it's not official, but it is imminent. We've seen him already take a stadium tour. We've seen pictures of him.
Nice.
He's already out taking pictures in the Hollywood sign. So it is imminent. So that's a great point. I have to asterisk this. Nothing is
Yeah.
confirmed. You're absolutely right. But dot dot dot. He will potentially be the
Yeah.
most exciting addition to this team at this moment in time.
Yeah, and I like it too. When Brugman moved on and Delgado moved on, I wasn't sold on Sean Davis. No, Sean Davis, good little player, but needs to play next to somebody who is also he played next to Dax McCarty, right? He played next to Felipe. He played next to these players who elevated his game. And then he went to Nashville. He played next to Annabelle Godoy, right? Played next to Dax McCarty again, right? Like players who elevate him up. And, and I'm not saying Edwin Cerrillo is a bad player, but he's not, to me, at that level where he'll elevate Sean Davis. So I knew that something was going to come, and I think this is a really solid a solid pickup, not only for now, but like you mentioned, U22. This is 3-4 years on. What can you turn him into? Where can he go? Right. So that's really exciting. The other one I wanted to highlight was Matthias Jorgensen, right? Another
Mm.
center back with tons of experience. Yes, he's up there in age, but I have now thrown that out the window after that made me look silly when I tried. I said that last year. But this is quite clearly the build that they want to go with. The back line that has experience, is physical, can deal with the more direct play in the air, and then maybe outside backs that can make up the pace part of it, right? But I really really like going out, and I don't love, and we'll get to the biggest loss here in a second, but I don't love how they filled this, or they created this spot for him. But it's very clear that, like you mentioned, run it back, right? We're going to go in with experience. We're going to go and win now, and we are going to make sure that we can run it back. So I think that's also going to be a really good get.
Yeah. Look, if you think about it, this in the context of who is he actually replacing? He's replacing Martin Cáceres, right? A guy,
Mm,
unfortunately, we only saw in the first half of the season, maybe even less than that. And he wasn't. We knew even from the beginning of the season, which is probably why your defensive concerns and others as well came up, because if you're going to start Yoshida and Cáceres most games, and look, credit to Maya, man, he started all 34 games, which is an absolutely amazing feat at his age, but you can see why those concerns came up, right? And then
mhm.
what's interesting though is we haven't talked about this player, but you talked about how sort of the defense just kind of got better and became good enough to win MLS Cup, and a big reason of that is Emilio Garces, man. Emilio Garces was the guy that literally changed the fortunes of our defense. And for all of the defensive mistakes, recoveries, his recovery pace is unreal. I saw that in real time in MLS Cup. I forgot who was it that broke through, and his recovery pace over 10 yards is absolutely unreal, right?
Yeah.
So that was the guy that I think really changed our fortunes and also led to other decisions in the roster as well. If you look at the center backs.
Yeah, I won't spoil it. I've got a nice little bit about him coming up, but I won't spoil that. But like we mentioned, we have name dropped a couple already that have moved on here. You guys have had to make room or have had room made for you. Biggest loss. And I will open it up. Usually this is just transfer out or not re-sign, but there might be another one there that kind of fills that role. So
Yeah,
I'll send it on over.
I'm just gonna start off with this, man. We've had a lot of big losses this season, and it's been really tough to see a lot of these players go. I mean, of course, it's natural. You're gonna have an emotional attachment to players that brought you the sixth trophy to the city. But the biggest loss for me, I'm gonna tell you, and this is the recent loss, which is Dejan Jovalic, man. I think to me that is a huge loss on the top of the pitch. One of the hardest things I think to find and by the way, I listened to one of your earlier podcasts, and I didn't realize that you were into coaching or you were in the process of coaching. So
Yeah.
I think when I tell you this will probably make a lot of sense. One of the hardest traits to recruit is to put the ball in the back of the net. That's one of the
Yeah.
hardest things to find in the open market, right? And you can't really teach that. It's a knack. It's a natural instinct. It's an ability. Yes, repetitions can help you increase that, but just to have that innate ability. And Jovalic this year, or sorry, last year, really showed an ability to do that, I think, consistently and in different ways. And I think I tweeted about this the other day. One of the best compliments that I can give Jovalic was he started off only known as a super sub that could only score tap ins. And he left as probably one of the best, most complete number nines in MLS, arguably. And of course, a champion, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
so and so those 21 goals, man, those 21 goals, 7 assists, that's going to be hard to sort of replace. I know that we're probably looking at a U22 spot in that particular spot as well, just to cover it. But again, it's and by the way, it's not only the number of goals, it's the occasion and where they scored them and when he scored them, right? Think about this, man. He scored the game-winning goal in the Western Conference Final and an MLS Cup.
Yeah.
He is a certified LAFC killer. He always scores big goals against LAFC in those rivalry games. So, and that's hard to replace, and that's why I think he's the biggest loss, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and couldn't agree more about the how do you teach goal scoring? How do you recruit goal scoring? Right? Because we would go on recruit trips when I was a grad assist up at in New York, and the second you see somebody who even has an ounce of like composure in front of goal, you just take a look down at the sheet, and it's like been committed for 2 years to X school, right? It's like, oh yeah, late on that one too, right? It's such a unique trait to have. And you're 100% correct. It's going to be very difficult to replace. Um, and that's something that they're going to have to do their due diligence on too, because as certain teams, and I'm not going to name drop any, but as certain teams have shown, you can't just go bring in any striker you want and say, okay, go score goals now, because you'll go through 9 years of having strikers who can't score goals.
Yeah, but the good news though, Andrew, is that at least for us Galaxy fans, we have the perfect guy at the helm who's basically hit on all of his recruits,
Yeah.
and I trust in that guy and the rest of his technical team to recruit the right player, not only for skill set but also character and drive, and that's a lot. Those are the soft things that maybe national media or people that don't follow the Galaxy day to day, maybe like we do, that we
Mhm.
saw in Jovic. Man, he's a killer. He's got that killer instinct. He's got that high level of drive and competitiveness, and that goes a long way.
Yeah, 100% couldn't agree more. For me, again, I prepped this before all these all kind of the bigger moves came. But the other one that I thought, and I was alluding to it before, was Jalen Neal. I thought
Yeah.
he was untouchable, right? Because he was the future. I thought they looked at him, and honestly, last year I thought about Furkanis as well. Kind of those two just coming up together, and once Cáceres and once Yoshida were ready to move on, it's like boom, you got two more ready to go. Now they're both gone, which I think is kind of crazy. But after the injury setback, it's always gonna take a knack on you a little bit. But I would have liked to see him stick around. I would have liked to see how he would have fit in But then they replace him with Matthias Jorgensen. It's like I get it. It's very win now. Montreal is going to benefit greatly from that. Neil's going to benefit greatly from that because he needs to get some minutes. But I don't. I thought in terms of the future, that's a big loss. But
Yeah.
you can find that. You can fix that.
I mean, the biggest villain for the LA Galaxy this offseason has been the MLS salary cap, Andrew,
Yes.
and that is a totally different podcast that probably we need to get on for a couple hours and just like
Yes.
vibe over, right? But that is an absolute just killer. And a lot of the problems this year, and again, Will Kuntz was gracious enough to come on our show and really explain this. It's most of these transactions, Andrew, have been math problems. They have
Yeah.
not been a skill or talent problem. They have been math problems. And one of the things about Jalen Neal was he was on his last year of his deal. He is probably looking to get paid, right? Like, and
Mhm.
on top of getting minutes. So you combine all those different factors, and unfortunately, it was a casualty of the salary cap. And here's the other thing. Something crazy that I learned from Will Kuntz, which is, that bonuses count against the salary cap. That is
No
unreal. I thought
way.
bonuses, yeah, bonuses
Oh.
apparently. So if you win MLS Cup, for
Mhm.
example, you got to pay all your guys. And by the way, it counts against dude. It's salary cap rules are unreal. I'm learning something new every day. So there you go.
We did an episode with a guy his Blue Sky handles MLS Box to Box. He was on Twitter for a while. He moved over there. But he was a guy who would talk really in depth. Like he knew salary cap back to back of his hand. We spent an hour just it doesn't make any sense. It's holding us back. I mean, we shredded the thing, and we could still go for another 2 hours because now you're looking at right. We gave the example like Columbus and Zelarayan, right, which is ridiculous. But they this new cash for players rule is maybe doing a little bit better.
Right,
But
right, right.
you know the other one we just talked about it with between Cincinnati and Colorado is Awazian. Awazian comes in as a replacement for an injured Matt Miazga, is a phenomenal addition, but Matt Miazga's off the injury list. Figure it out because you can't keep him.
Math
So
problem.
boom, off he
Yeah.
goes. Yeah, it's as much as I understand what it is and why it's there, it is silly that it is still at a position that it's at. And I'll leave it there because we could go forever on
Yep.
that.
Yep.
But I did want to transition and go into this idea of players to watch or breakout players because you have a lot of new faces in there. You've got a couple of young guys that you want to keep an eye on. Who is a player that non-LA Galaxy fans should be watching as like, oh, this guy's going to be big this year?
So I think an interesting one, and so I'm actually not going to talk a bit about a new signing, and it's a guy that we've already had, but this is an interesting storyline to watch, which is Julian Aude.
Ooh.
Julian Aude is a guy that we signed on a U22 deal the beginning of 2023. And last year, he started the season as the starting left back for the LA Galaxy. And unfortunately, due to I believe it was a groin injury, he missed 11 games in the middle of the regular season. And basically, what ended up being all the playoffs. And during that time, John Nelson, a guy that honestly LA Galaxy fans did not have many expectations for. He was, second fiddle at St. Louis. He stepped in there, man, and boy, did he ever perform. I mean, that guy really, really earned his bucks
Yep.
last season because he took control of the starting left back position and never let it go. He really didn't. And so I think coming in this season, again, you would understand this, and the psychology behind this as a coach, as a trainer, is really interesting. Which is, what mindset is Julian Aude coming into the season at? Right, he's a guy. He's on a U22. He's got really really high upside, excellent height, really combative tackler. Going to the stats, he's always in the 80th or 90th percentile if you look at all the tackling and defensive stats on FBref. And when he's fit, he provides us a really interesting left wing outlet on the left in the attacks, and he really joins that attack. And that's one of his strengths, is that engine and that stamina to go up and down that left flank. It's kind of interesting because slightly different profile and physique, but he kind of reminds me a little bit of Token, to be honest
Hmm.
with you.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
that type of guy that goes up and down the wing. He could play as a wing back if our system called for it. But I think mentally, how is he going to approach the season? And look, I'm hoping that he comes in wanting to just seething, right? And wanting
Hmm.
to grab a hold of that starting position, because I think his upside is really high. Look, he came from Lanús in Argentina, where he was really highly touted as I believe, a 20 or 21-year-old at the time. And yeah, man, it's going to be that for me. I think is a really interesting one. Who's going to win out that left back spot? Because if Julian Audi does not perform, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what we do, and especially he's taking up a very valuable U22 spot, right? So
Oh yeah.
that's gonna be fun to watch, man.
Well, and as much as it's a fun thing to think about in terms of like how is he going to do that, it is a really, really interesting challenge for the coaching staff and specifically Greg Vanney, right? How do you keep a player who has that much on his salary, who has this, and I'm making an assumption here, but this background of being like this prodigy, if you will, coming out of a really nice academy in a very big footballing country, now goes to America, and you can't even get in the starting 11 behind this 26-year-old journeyman MLS guy. Like, how do you then, as a coach, make sure that he understands, like, you got to be ready for the next chance, right? Because the second John messes up, you're in. Right. Or the
Correct.
second you mess up, John's in. Right. So how do you keep that going? And that was my favorite part as a coach because I was always fourth string and I was never a great player, but I always had that same mindset. It was like illness, injuries, all this stuff can happen. I got to be ready to go. And then how do you pass that on to your team? Because if you don't control that, now the other guy who's riding bench for the entire season, now he's getting upset, and now the guy
Yep.
next to him's getting upset. And how do you prevent that from becoming the one bad apple ruins the bunch, right? It's
Yeah,
a
and,
little
and
little
this
psychology there.
and this is where locker room culture and just team culture is really important here because you could flip that on its head and says and you could make the argument that without competition for places, that breeds complacency,
Yeah.
right? So if you look at it, if you have a culture that promotes that, I think that elevates the floor of everyone, right? In terms of look, this guy's gunning for my starting spot. Like I better do what coach is asking him. I better like do the things that are going to help us win games, right? So I think that
Mhm.
is very interesting. And from all of the things that we've seen, especially last year in the locker room, I think that's the type of competitive culture that Greg Vanney and his coaching staff are building.
Yeah, yeah, and we had that, and I'll one last tidbit because we could talk coaching all day long. It seems like we're gonna have to at some point.
Yeah,
But we were doing that. I was at a school called Alfred University, and we had knockout recruiting class after knockout recruiting class, and it was like we had that thing like okay, everybody's fighting for each other. We're all doing this, and then we had one bad year, and everybody was like, I'm good. Nobody
mm-hmm.
want no young guy was gonna come even if he wants to come get it, he can't come get it. And all of a sudden you see us go from here to here and then down to here because
Yeah,
that mindset switched off. And it's such an
it's
interesting challenge that you have to keep an eye on. Back to the LA Galaxy. Um, I hinted about this guy before, and I raved about him after MLS Cup because he absolutely ruined us. And it is Carlos Garces as my player to watch because he is a dude. The dude,
yeah.
I mean, if he puts this type of performance in consistently, and this may be a bold take, I don't think defensive player of the year is a ridiculous shout. Like I don't think that is something that is out of his ability because he's got all the tools to do it. And he's on a team that can highlight him, right? If he was on okay, how do I say this without being really disrespectful? If he was on 2024 San Jose doing what he did against us in MLS Cup, nobody bats an eye. It's like, oh
Right.
great, right? But because he's going to be on a team that should be competing really, really well, I think that this is not a ridiculous take for me. But
No, that's a really good one. That's a
yeah,
very very good one. I think his ceiling is, man. He his defensive qualities. He reminds me of that like Yamar Nuhu, just strong,
yeah,
physical, recovery pace for days. Yeah, just what a player, what a gem.
yeah.
Will Kuntz unearthed there.
It's ridiculous how he has literally hit on everything. I don't think that's like physically possible, but um, I do want to kind of transition here into this idea of like one big question, right?
Yeah.
So as we get into the 2025 season, what is the one thing that's still kind of hovering over in the clouds that you're still on your mind? Like, how are we going to deal with this?
This might be Captain Obvious here, but man, it's very simply put the health and status of Ricky Pooge. That is a huge question mark, and that will ultimately define our MLS Cup run, provided that we do get in the playoffs, right? Because it's not only when is he going to come back, Andrew, but it's how is he
How?
going to come back? That is a very serious injury. And for a guy that plays in the playing style that Ricky Puig does, swivels, pivots, quick on the half turn, his acceleration over the first 5 yards is what gets him that separation. So is that burst going to be back, right? That's just the way Ricky plays. And he plays, I'm a huge Arsenal fan, so maybe Arsenal fans that are listening to this might get this reference, but he plays sort of in that not reckless, but valiant way as Jack Wilshere. And that's why Jack
Mm.
Wilshere was always on the injury table, right? He plays in that sort of way. He's super brave, just super brave on the ball. And you know, MLS teams are, it's in their scouting plan. You stop, you tackle, you do whatever you got to do to stop that guy from getting into the final third, right? So I think, again, without being too obvious, I think that is the biggest question mark for this LA Galaxy team.
Man, it was crazy. When we were doing our individual, mine and Connor's preview of MLS Cup, I spent like 30 minutes putting up a game plan of like how are Red Bull going to stop Ricky Puig? And in the middle of me putting it like, but I brought Nex and O's boards out. I'm like, we can't let him get in here. Like I was in it. And then as I'm doing that, I'm like, oh, Ricky Puig isn't playing. Erase, 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 erase. And
Yeah.
then the question was, how do we deal who comes in? And we didn't know what that was
Well,
going to happen.
well, and that's the interesting part, right? Which is I wasted about 5 podcasts arguing whether we should start Diego Fagundes or Marco Royce, and look who started,
And there goes
right?
Gaston
Gaston,
Brugman.
wow, just like, and you guys were talking. I remember on that Goals TV episode, we were talking about that in
Yeah.
terms of what Greg Vanney could pull, and man, just masterclass of a game plan, I guess.
Yeah. And not a single person. And on our conversation, mine and Connor's conversation, anybody anywhere, I don't think the name Gaston Brugman came out once from anybody. There was nobody who was like, oh, this is what's gonna happen. We're gonna take our 10 and we're gonna invert it and just watch what happens. It's like brilliant. It's
Yeah,
brilliant from Greg, truthfully. But yeah, mine's right along the same line there, right? Can this team continue their fight for the top of the West without Puig for as long as they're going to be there, right? And I actually have a note there that where Brugman was key in replacing him for one match, but he's gone
yeah,
too, and so
right,
is Morky Delgado. Like it's a whole new room. Are they going to be able to continue to push for the top of the West without what really ran the show for them in
absolutely,
24?
yeah.
So with all that in mind, let's put it to the test then. Give me a predicted finish. Where do you think they're going to be?
Oh man, I've said this multiple times, and I know Galaxy fans are probably hating on me for saying this, but man, we are. I don't want to put a number on it,
Hmm.
but let's put it this way: we are going to be fighting to have home court advantage in the first round of the playoffs. We're going to be fighting
Yeah.
for that fourth seed. I feel like we are. Look, based off of credit, I remember I was on Jose. I was on with Jose on Goals TV, and he was saying that I'm not ready to concede that the Galaxy are still not a top two team in the Western Conference. And I would agree with him coming into the season. But I think as the season will play out, we've got a lot of fixtures this year, Andrew. We're playing in a lot of
Yeah.
competitions. Yes, we're not playing in the Open Cup, but we've got CCC, Campeones Cup, all the cups that you can think of.
Hmm.
And that fixture congestion without your arguably best DP on your team, that's going to be super tough, man. On top of figuring out how to, gel this team together. And I think preseason, of course, getting the roster ready is going to be a huge part of that. But I think we are going to struggle in the beginning and middle parts of the season. And we might have that late surge like Seattle did last year coming into the playoffs. And, Eric, Portuguese Hammer from Corner of the Galaxy, always talks about, you have to peak at the right time. So, what I wonder if the stars will align at that point, but I think we are going to be fighting for that top four, man. I think there's just too many forces against the Galaxy with not having Pooj, the fixture congestion. How is this team going to hold up? There's just too many question marks for me to definitively say that we're favorites for the Western Conference, to be honest with you.
Yeah. No, I perfectly put. Perfectly put, right? I think it's still a great team with or without Puig. But my vision for this team is like they are going to struggle to figure out how to play without him for the first, let's say, 4 to 7 games of the season. And that may just be enough to put them off the pace. And I think I would agree with you completely. They're pushing for that top four. I have them anywhere between 3 to 6, depending on how long it takes them to figure that out. Because I mean, it was such a part of their identity, right? Ricky Puig, get the ball and work, right? Dude, what do you do? 300 touches more than anybody else in the league, something along
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Like that was LA Galaxy. So now trying to figure out how to work around that and trying to figure out how to work out with no Dejan Jovic either, who was working really well for you, and we'll throw that graphic up there too, the one that you have created where you go from Ricky Puig and Dejan Jovic to Miguel Berry. Like
Yeah.
that makes me want to scream inside.
And Marco Royce is going to have to play a bigger role this year. But
Yeah.
in terms of his health, I mean, you're not going to count on Marco to play 90 minutes every game, right? So it's like, what do you do there? That's going to be a really interesting dynamic. And I'm going to bring up one more thing, Andrew, that we haven't
Mhm.
really talked about. It's an external factor. The competition in the West has significantly increased. The
Yes.
West has reloaded significantly. Look at what Bruce is doing with San Jose. Look at Austin in terms of the investment that they made into the team. Seattle has reloaded their attack. LAFC, you know they're going to be there. Minnesota is a young little team on the up. You've got a lot of players for that top four, and I think that also plays a huge factor into where the LA Galaxy can finish. Remember, last year, I believe Seattle finished with 57 points, and that was good for a fourth place finish. We finished with 64. That's only two losses and a draw more.
Right.
And I could easily see that happening. So, man, the West is going to be ultra competitive this season.
Man, I'm telling you, we talk all the time about how like the East is the bloodbath and like the West, you've got everybody who's fighting for the top nine, but you've got a split there very clear. And you saw it last year. There weren't a lot of people fighting for playoffs towards the end. I don't think that's going to be the case this year. I think you're going to have a ton, and in both conferences, right? I think
Yeah.
the East is still crazy, and the West has gotten to a point where it's like I don't want to make predictions right before the season starts because I'm going to look stupid no matter what I say.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
But that's what we do. That's the
Yeah,
casualty of
it's
our
it's
job
always
here. Yeah.
yeah, it's always for the fun of it, right? But
Yeah.
Ananda, thank you so much for being here. I really, really enjoyed this
Of
chat, and
course.
I'm already planning all the different things that we're going to have to talk about in the near future because there seems to be a lot of it. But I want to give you a little bit of time to share where people can find you and your work.
Yeah. You guys can follow me either on X or Instagram, all your favorite socials at Ananda Galaxiana. You can follow our show, our YouTube show. It's at Cuna Galaxiana is the handles on all the socials, and youtube.com/@ Cuna Galaxiana. I'm pretty sure you're going to put a link there for your
Yep.
listeners in the description of the show and all that good stuff. So yeah, we stream live. If you guys are interested in hearing more LA Galaxy content, we are on live Mondays and Thursdays at 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And of course, we have some one off videos that we do as well and some other breakout shows. And yeah, go ahead and follow us there if you so please.
Yeah, guys, head over. Really, really great content. You heard him talk about all the individual and different people that they are interviewing all the way up to Will Kuntz. Like this isn't like our show where we're like, oh yeah, we're just talking to ourselves. Like, they got some really, really good stuff there. So go on over, show them the love. It is going to be really, really good for you guys. If you guys are new here to our show for the first time, I say we like Connor's here. I've been doing that for a while, but Connor and I, we do a show every Monday and Wednesday. Usually Mondays are reacting to MLS news that has happened, transfers, trades, injuries, coaching, firings, all that good stuff. That's usually Monday. And then Wednesday is usually a mix of if there's a lot of news, we'll continue to talk about that, or we'll do an MLS history segment where if you are a newer fan to the league, you might not know about some of the big moments that stand out in the league. We cover all of those as well. So if you like what we do, come on and give us a follow. We're on YouTube and Twitter and or X and Blue Sky and TikTok, and we're pretty
Carrier
much
pigeon,
everywhere.
all that stuff, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're wherever you want to go, you find us. Just search the Designated Players and MLS podcast, and we will pop up. But Ananda, thank you again so much for being here. We really enjoyed having you. Thank you all of our listeners. Make sure you go follow both of us, and we will see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. See ya.